So this is going to be the last of the videos, at least for now, of lessons from my masters. And one of the things I want to point out is that there's a million things my masters did. I mean, I can go on and on. And I try to capture that in the book that's going to be coming out very shortly. But one of the things I want you to understand is that my masters, they were not perfect. They were human just like everybody else. And I think that's kind of the point I try to bring out in the book, to demystify the stuff they did, that these were real skills. There's a real science behind it. And just because we don't fully understand the sensorial processing of how our brains do things and how we make decisions doesn't mean it's any less scientific. And I think that's important, because a lot of times people get a little too wrapped around the axle over wanting to know mystical secrets. Just from working with Grandmaster Perkins and Grandmaster Karen, I can tell you, I personally can see why people perceive the ancient masters had mystical, supernatural powers, or even martial artists today who have a high level of skill, where people kind of assume they have some kind of mystical skill or even some kind of super secret technique, when in fact everything they're doing is actually perfectly scientific. The other thing I want to point out is, and if you get this understanding, you're going to really expand your own horizons as far as your own development. I think the greatest secret my masters had was not just what they could do in the body physically, because some of that was just, they had a lot of God-given natural talent, and you just cannot take that away from another person. But this understanding that they had a different perspective, a different mindset of how they used their bodies and how they perceived the fight. And I think that all too often people would ask me, how do I do this? How do I do that? Or how does John do this? Or how do you think he does that? Not realizing it all starts with his mindset. He had a different way of looking at movement and looking at motion. Tim used to say it all the time. You'll read it in the book. You're just dealing with motion. And if you get that understanding and you start from that basis, and then you realize whether a person's throwing a punch, whether they're throwing a kick, a punch is a punch, a kick is a kick. Me throwing my arm out as a punch versus a spear hand versus a palm strike, or me just extending my arm. What's the common denominator? My arm still has to basically do this motion. And that's what Tim was getting across to me. And so in the heat of battle, when I see your arm moving like that, I'm not sitting around waiting for you to hit me, or waiting for you to almost hit me and then determine how I should deal with it. And I think that's a big flaw in a lot of martial arts systems, where everybody is looking for a specific technique to deal with this thing or that thing, and they're missing the overall picture of what's really going on, and that is there are certain motions that a person has to engage in order to make those things work. There's just no way around it. And so I just want you to understand that they had a different mindset, they had a different point of view, and also they engaged with a lot of ruthless intention. They were not above using deception, even in training on students. I mean, I can tell you right now, everything they did and how they made stuff work was pure deception. To me, it's absolute brilliant stuff of how they were able to incorporate deception, whereas even the very movements they made threw your sense of timing off. And, if you're a person wanting to learn how to fight to win the fight of your life, why wouldn't you want to know how to do that? Whereas as you're moving with another person, whether they're coming to attack you, whatever, you're stepping off line or whatever the case may be, that you're throwing their intention off or their ability to track you so much that everything you do is right, where everything they do is wrong. So this, like I said, will be the last video or last series of videos I'm going to do, lessons from my masters. This will probably be the last one, for at least for a while. And what I want you to just understand as I wrap kind of the series up, if you haven't seen the series, go back and look at the whole series again up to this point, because a lot of things are going to start coming together and make a lot of sense for you. All right, and we're back. Okay, so what I was talking about before, about my masters having a different perspective, a different mindset on things, this is the kind of stuff I'm talking about. And like I said, you can go back and look at some of the other videos. I may have briefly touched on it in some of the other videos, but I'm just trying to tie some things together. But what I want you to understand is this, is that when they were moving with people, everything they did was based on what they were sensorially experiencing, meaning whatever they were feeling and the perspective in which they perceived that information, that's what drove their actions. So as I'm working with Jack, And let's say I'm trying to hit Jack. Well, Jack, he can feel me trying to do that. And it doesn't matter how light his touch is or how much force I'm exerting. He can feel me doing that. Thanks for not slapping my head off, by the way. But it's that fundamental. There's no guesswork. And it doesn't mean that there isn't technique or that my masters didn't have technique. As a matter of fact, they had crazy technique. But when I talk about technique, I'm not talking about it from a more a regimented, structured thing where that was all they did or that was the only way to do it. It was really, a lot of their technique was they had a basic understanding of how to move in certain positions, and then everything else was kind of something they created as they went along based on what they were experiencing. And I think that's an aspect of the martial arts in general, I don't care what you do, where it's a missing piece. One of the reasons why the grappling arts, and to their credit, I used to be a wrestler, so I get it, why the grappling arts are so popular these days is because of the fact that you're getting immediate feedback. You're experiencing what's really going on. You're not fighting out in space trying to guess. You're feeling what the other person is doing. He's feeling what you're doing, and you're both playing off each other. So when you execute a move, it's because you experience something, and then the only way they can kind of get around that is they got to be using some form of deception, because we can all feel faster than another person can move. So when you're dealing with the internal arts because to me, I don't make a distinction between the internal arts like Tai Chi, Bagua, Sing Yi, whatever, or even the old art I used to do, Guided Chaos or Warrior Flow, versus grappling. I don't make it, or Jiu-Jitsu, I don't make a distinction. I mean, to me, here we go. Okay, Jiu-Jitsu 101 right there. It's Jiu-Jitsu. That's right out of the books, right out of the manuals. But how the masters did that, as my masters taught me, was they were feeling the movement, the pattern of the movement of another person, and they were repositioning themselves at a place in the future where they can make it work. And of course, it takes practice to do that, but that's what they were doing. So as I'm moving and making stuff work with another person, the choices I'm making are based not only on my experience, but what I'm understanding sensorially within that flow, within that movement. The other thing is my masters were big on, and I bring this out in the book, shameless plug, is focusing on 100% mastery to the best of your abilities of your body. I cannot overemphasize that. When I first started training in Guided Chaos, then Kishwando, Grandmaster Karen was very big on me developing my body. I would say probably 70, maybe 75% of my training focused around helping me develop control over my body through balance exercises or looseness exercises, or what we call equilibrium control and subtle muscle control in Warrior Flow. And the reason for that is it doesn't matter how many techniques or skills I know. If I can't control my body and I'm just windmilling, he doesn't have to be better than me. He just needs to get lucky and step in at the right moment. So in a real fight, in a real confrontation, I don't want to guess. I want to reduce guessing as much as possible. So if I got a haystack and I'm trying to find a needle, I'm not trying to sift through all that stuff. I'm trying to shrink the size of that haystack as much as possible so that I can say, okay, I only have to deal with this. I don't have to deal with all this because all this is superfluous stuff I don't have to deal with. And so as I move and working with Jack, whatever we're doing, because we're both playing off of each other, we're both playing off the feedback, the biofeedback we're getting. The choices I'm making are based on what I'm actually experiencing. And if I'm getting hit, well, at least I know, okay, whatever I did there obviously wasn't the right thing. Then I got to figure out, is it because he moved in a way that caused me to move like that, or I'm just not paying attention? And on it goes. There's no beginning or end with this. It's just endless stuff. But my point is, my masters, whenever they did stuff, it was all about, I feel where you are relative to my body. I know you have the same information because I'm touching you, and you know where I'm at. I'm going to position myself at a place in the future or ahead of your movement, whereas I'm going to force you to have to make more choices with your body than I made. So they were always employing deception. And like I said in previous videos, Tim always liked to have a little contact, and most of his deceptions were either through pulsing or he was usually doing some kind of a tool replacement. Rarely did he do the thing that Grandmaster Perkins called ghosting. Not that he couldn't just hit you outright like that. It's just that it was a preference of his, and that was kind of the idiosyncrasies that I bring out in the book of the differences between my masters, where they kind of worked off of different ends of the spectrum. Whereas Grandmaster Perkins, he understood these things we call proximity, where we have this visceral sense where we can feel things within proximity of our body, and he would play off of that. So as he moved towards you and caused you to have to deal with his arm, he can feel that, just like you can feel that. Mm-hmm. And then he would move his body as if you were already in direct physical contact, which gave him more time to make adjustments and caused you to have to kind of chase what he was doing. So they were always, both of them, using deception, always using deception. And to me, that's a major thing, because if I can deceive you to throw off your sense of timing in the microsecond I need to, the fight is already over. I mean, why do people sucker punch people? For the same reason. They don't want to get hit either. They want to win. So just bear in mind, in everything my masters did, there was always a method to the madness. It was not this willy-nilly just moving around stuff that people think. Last point I'm going to make on my masters. When we talk about contact flow, the exercise contact flow, tremendous training opportunity that gets wasted because everybody wants to play tit for tat. Oh, I got you. They're wasting their time. Me, when I'm flowing, we don't call it contact flow and wave flow. We call it sensory flow exercise. There's a little trademark thing next to it. You know, I stole that from Dr. Riggio because I like that term, and I stole it from him. So, no attribution for him, right? But anyway, when we're doing the exercise where you go contact flow, sticky hands, chi sao, whatever you want to call it, I don't care. The point is, I feel where you are relative to my body. And what this allows me to do is, if I say I'm not good at a certain skill, because I'm always in my mind working on my greatest weakness, right? Not my greatest strength. Because your weakness is the one that's going to give you the most trouble. And let's say I have a problem in here of getting my body out of the way of strikes. What I'll actually do is I'll set it up where I'm going to flow with you. I want you to try to strike me. We'll start off at a moderate pace so I don't get punched out in my own video. And then focusing on feeling and anticipating his motion, only worried about dealing with his motion, where I actually only practice just getting out of the way and flowing and staying in here as much as I can, to develop that subconscious competence, whereas it becomes just a habit or a purposeful habit, whereas no matter what I do, I'm always moving in a way based on what I'm feeling sensorially of getting out of the way first. So in essence, and Grandmaster Perkins used to do this with me all the time. That's why I want to make sure I cover this, where he would actually do things with me where he would hobble his own ability, where he wouldn't do things he could do, but allow me to do pretty much whatever I wanted or within a certain parameter, so that he would practice and get some practice in on somebody with some skill on how to negate things. Because, hey, he wanted to get his work in too. I'm all about that. But it was also teaching me how he works on his greatest weaknesses. So because he lacked a lot of reach, and I had a tremendous reach over Grandmaster Perkins, he would sometimes work with me, let me do whatever I want. All he would do is just clear my hand and be unavailable. That's all he would do. Sometimes he wouldn't even touch. He would just step and throw my timing off. But what that was doing was, it was giving him the ability to work with someone who could make the adjustments in most cases that most people couldn't make because they don't have the control of their body, and negate my advantages of reach, speed, all that other stuff. And it taught me a methodology of how I can improve my own ability. Just like Grandmaster Karen taught me how to model Grandmaster Perkins, whereas it's not about mimicking what he's doing, but actually understanding that in order for this to happen, his body's got to move a certain way, and in order for him to hit with power, he's got to also be on balance. But if I can understand not this uppercut, this subtle motion here, and realize, okay, whatever this is going to be, because we're already in a fight, it can't be good for me, and then learn how to anticipate and get ahead of things. So those are just some of the things that they did. I can go on and on with these videos, but I'm trying to cut it off here. At least I may come back later on and make some more videos, like I said. But the point is, when you go through the book and you read the book, just understand what I'm trying to get across, and you'll see me repeat certain concepts over and over and over, because I'm trying to get people to understand that the stuff they did, God bless them, to the stuff they did, it was not magic, it was very scientific, and outside of any God-given natural ability a person may have. These are things, because it's how the laws of physics work and how humans move through the universe through the laws of physics. These are skills that pretty much to varying degrees every person can learn how to do. And I think that's my message.